House correspondent for The Hill, Jordan Fabian. Also, Time Magazine contributor Jay Newton-Small and congressional reporter for the Daily Beast, Andrew Desiderio. And let's start with you, Andrew, as we heard from the president talking about that's to be determined as far as severe punishment. We also got reaction from him on a Khashoggi earlier. I want to play that and then we'll talk about it.
He perhaps won't be or isn't around, and that's very sad. I think we would have known by now. That was our first hope. Our first hope was that he was not killed, but maybe that's not looking too good, right? From what we're hearing.
A lot still to learn, I think, Mr.
But there's a lot to learn.
All right, earlier the president threatened severe punishment against Saudi Arabia in that CBS interview and they were found responsible. So given the fact that just a few moments ago he said he still has to make a determination of what that will be, how likely is severe punishment from the White House, and what can we see it in the form of?
Well, we saw just a couple of days ago the chairman and the ranking member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee triggered an investigation under what's called the Magnitsky Act, which was passed by Congress and signed into law by President Obama over his objections, of course, which would put sanctions on global human rights abusers. It was initially targeted toward Russia, and then they expanded it to make it sort of worldwide. And what they did was Congress didn't even have to vote on anything. All it took was the chairman and the ranking member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee coming together. They had a lot of co-signers. Almost the entire Foreign Relations Committee signed on board with it. And it triggered an investigation. And if the investigation finds what we all believe to be true, which was that Mr. Khashoggi was in fact murdered, it would put really strict sanctions on the Saudi government, which would really upend the president's goal of sort of forming a partnership with Saudi Arabia toward his goal of Middle East peace and other things. And we're seeing a growing rift between Capitol Hill and the White House over this issue of arms deals, which we saw the president address also in the Oval Office.
Right, and some calls saying, hey, when it comes to this arms deal, it's $110 billion. Maybe let's put that on hold. Well, it hasn't technically begun, but as far as curbing that deal, Jordan, I want to ask you when it comes to Saudi Arabia and their take on all of this. They released a new statement today, reading in part this: what has been circulating in terms of supposed orders to kill Jamal are outright lies and baseless allegations against the kingdom's government, which is committed to its principles, rules, and traditions, and is in compliance with international laws and conventions. So what do you make of the Saudis pointing the finger at the media?
Well, it's an interesting tactic, and I would say, like many times when we see public officials, both in this country and abroad, take this route, the evidence doesn't really back up their case. In fact, the evidence that we've seen, at least from Turkish authorities, points to their version of events, which is that he was taken into custody by a Saudi team and murdered. Now, that being said, the U.S. government hasn't endorsed those findings. It seems like they haven't personally been able to view a lot of that evidence, but the Saudis do not have evidence to back up these denials, and it's become increasingly a problem for them that they don't have this credibility to really back up their claims, and they're coming under increasing pressure now. The president's going to call the king, like he said, later today or tomorrow, and top U.S. officials have already talked to the Crown Prince about this, and pressure's not going to let up until they have some solid answers on what actually happened to him.
Yeah, meantime, you have questions and people looking into the prince's relationship with Jared Kushner, also the president. You have to factor in the relationship, the deep business ties he's had with Saudis and the royal family for the decades, deep into the 90s. I want to run that down for you here when it comes to the numbers. In 1991, when President Trump was nearly $900 million in debt, he sold his yacht to Saudi Prince Al-Walid bin Talal for $20 million. Or in 2017, Saudi lobbyists, spent $270,000 to reserve rooms at Trump's hotel in Washington. And this year, Trump's New York and Chicago hotels reported upticks in Saudi bookings. But before we talk about it, I want to consider this sound from 60 Minutes in that interview with Donald Trump to air tomorrow. Let's listen.
As of this moment, they deny it, and they deny it vehemently. Could it be them? Yes.
Jared, your son-in-law, got on the phone and asked the prince, did he deny it?
They deny it. They deny it every way you can imagine. In the not-too-distant future, I think we'll know an answer. We're going to get to the bottom of it, and there will be severe punishment.
All right, this was taped a few days ago, Thursday, Friday, but we've even heard, the kind of mixed messaging when it comes to the president, without saying, well, I don't know what form of punishment should be, I don't know what we should do, to severe punishment, and even just moments ago we heard from him in the White House. Jay, sorry, apologize.
Sorry, Francis. So yeah, I think that, look, with Donald Trump, everything is tonal, right? And we saw this even with the press conference he just gave, talking about his relationship with Turkey, how 1 minute in like the last few months, the relationship's been pretty fraught. What did them freeing this pastor do? Well, it really switched his opinion of Turkey and turned him to like become much more optimistic about the relationship. I think similarly, you know, he plays that card, that cudgel with other countries like Saudi Arabia, and a lot of his messaging to them is simply tonal. I'm displeased with you, I'm pleased with you, and you see that obviously this week going on with the disappearance of Jamal Khashoggi, and you see him saying, I'm very unhappy with this, I want some answers, and I expect some answers. At the same time, it's clear that he's not willing to give up American jobs for his answers, saying that it's not worth the Pentagon contracts, but that tonal sort of impression does have some consequences. You saw dozens of American companies pull out of the Davos and the Desert Forum this week, which are really, you know, connections that the Crown Prince had been trying to make as they try to diversify their economy away from oil. And so this is a very important moment for Saudi Arabia. They have to figure out how are they going to answer this in a way that's going to appease Donald Trump, get him off of this tonal messaging saying that he's very unhappy with them, and get them back on track with the economic ties that they've been trying to build since Donald Trump came into office.
In the meantime, we're going to get a chance to see more of his tone and messaging to go to that rally later today in Kentucky and see how he touts again this pastor coming home. To all of you, thank you. Jay Newton-Small, I know you're going to be with me a little bit. Jordan, Fabian, and Andrew Desiderio, thank you. Up next, a lawsuit is filed in Georgia after more than 50